Satellites don't exist. We must go back to science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke to find out more. The origins of satellites came from the mind of famous science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke. He wrote the 1945 proposal for geostationary satellite communications. Clarke was a high-level Freemason as well as a homosexual and self-professed pedophile. Thrown in Satanism and you've got a heck of a guy. Clarke was writing science fiction stories along with other notable sci-fi writers Philip K. Dick, Robert Heinlein, and L. Ron Hubbard. Clarke did initially claim to know Hubbard. However, later he denied that statement and thought L. Ron Hubbard to be a completely crazy guy. There is a 7-year overlap between 1945 to 1952 when Jack Parsons, L. Ron Hubbard, and Arthur C. Clarke were all alive and were witness to the science fiction industry exploding into the eager minds of young people. I find the Roswell crash in July 1947 quite timely, and it certainly propelled the interest in space to mania levels. Hollywood didn't miss the cue since they are owned by Khazarian Rothschilds. Hollywood started cranking out sci-fi movie films by the truckload. At the top of the sci-fi movie heap was the great undiscovered frontier, space. The Khazarians saw an opportunity to make a ton of money by pushing this space meme. Okay, what's a meme? A meme is a new word in the English language. It's like a picture or a CGI that makes a statement. It might be accompanied with words or without words. Anyhow, a side point. At some point, a scheme was hatched to launch satellites into space for profit. NASA also became a tool to constantly remind humans of our insignificance in the balanced cosmic order. NASA has been beating the divinity out of us with pseudoscience, propaganda, and spiritual declinations. In other words, control. Pre-NASA had accumulated and assimilated the intellectual property from Jack Parsons to the point where he was no longer needed or wanted. Sputnik 1 was launched first in 1957, shocking, fooling the world, and Explorer 1 soon followed in 1958, the year NASA was created. NASA also created to militarize space and the atmosphere below it. But why? Okay, simply in order to control the deceptions of the Khazarian Mafia and their Freemason minions. The Khazarians needed to secure the perimeter and operate above any jurisdiction. All information above our head skyward was now in the hands of NASA as the quote official unquote source. In other words, the propaganda machine was created. It's laughable when you realize we're solely relying on just one source for all information regarding cosmos, NASA. Along with the controlled major mass media, NASA is free to dispense as much CGI, Pixlr, Photoshop, fairy tales as fast as we can gobble them up. I guarantee the Satanists of NASA has been laughing a long time about their ruses. However, they're being exposed more than ever as incompetent pseudoscience degenerates when real scrutiny is applied. Seemingly unrelated, in 1959, the Antarctic Treaty was signed and is now totally off limits backed by military force. The North Pole is also militarized, though no formal multilateral agreement exists. Still, any attempt to traverse either will result in immediate military expulsion and possible jail time. To date, no human has ever traversed Antarctica. Ever. Think about that for a moment and consider the absurdity of it. There's still a continent that has never been explored and we're not allowed access to it. Why? Satellite composite. What a joke. Even the treaty Wikipedia page uses a satellite composite image of Antarctica. Where's the real photo? Hold on now. NASA can somehow send a satellite to Sirius 257 million miles away without a hitch, but the deepest hole ever drilled is only 7.5 miles out of 3,959 miles to the center of the Earth. The other 3,952 miles is unknown, and pseudoscience fills in the blanks with no true hypothesis, just blather. Okay, man hasn't even been to the bottom of the ocean. So, the Challenger Deep is an example. So, if we haven't mastered our own domain, how probable is it NASA could send a probe 257 miles to Ceres and retrieve such stunning images? Probably zero. The only real images of Ceres that exist reside where they were created, on the hard drives of NASA computers. We will return to the aspect of Antarctica a little later, so consider it a seed that has been planted. The Zionist Mafia saw another opportunity to steal billions along with their fiat currency, central bank thievery, and debt-based slavery. That opportunity was satellites launched into orbit. They had their man, Freemason Arthur C. Clarke, waiting in the fold to ride shotgun, writing sci-fi genre as if it were science. He was a key piece in creating the exploding interest in space and the great mysteries of the cosmos. Clarke was the perfect asset that NASA needed, thus building on the occult foundation of Aleister Crowley, Jack Parsons, L. Ron Hubbard, and Walt Disney. Clarke's sci-fi prowess elevated his fictional ideas as seemingly plausible and scientific. Behind the veil of NASA, a symbolic baton was passed to Clarke, who becomes the key to both the Apollo fraud and the ongoing satellite fraud. How convenient it was that Clarke's 2001 A Space Odyssey was made into a movie by Stanley Kubrick in 1968, and the Apollo 11 moon landings were faked by Kubrick in 1969. One could surmise that 2001 A Space Odyssey was, quote, dry run, unquote, prior to Apollo. It also smacks of predictive programming with a little MK Ultra mixed in. 2001 A Space Odyssey was a premiere for the Apollo hoax. Since we know from part 1 that ISS is fake, then I post that such satellites are illusionary and don't exist. The only thing that exists are the profit margins of the Zionist Mafia. Satellites are pseudoscience, and there is no credible evidence that they exist. No actual photos, no actual video footage, only CGI, Pixlr, and other photo manipulating software. The staunch evidence that satellites do not exist is paradoxically simple because there's no credible proof they do exist. People remark, yeah, but I saw the International Space Station. Consider for a moment that what you saw was an inflatable replica, a World War II U.S.-made wide use of inflatable tanks and rubber airplanes to deceive Hitler's reconnaissance efforts. William Cooper, he was a Christian patriot and knew about many conspiracies. He was assassinated shortly after 9/11, it was actually in November of 2001, said, exploitation of the moon stopped because it was impossible to continue the hoax without being discovered. And of course they ran out of pre-filmed episodes. No man has ever ascended much higher than 300 miles, if that high, above the Earth's surface. At or under that altitude, the astronauts are beneath the radiation of the Van Allen belt, and the Van Allen belt shields them from the extreme radiation which permeates space. No man has ever orbited, landed on, or walked on the moon, if any publicity known program. Unquote. Now, of course, he didn't know about the flat Earth, but he did know that the whole moon mission was a fake. So how many manned missions to a planetary body could they fake? Just enough to set the table for the real goal. Thousands of fake satellites launched into space and big profit margins. This was a much safer and secure revenue than the Khazarian/Zionists have never returned to the moon makes the case. We'll use the same method of financial investigation that was used in Part 1 to connect Khazarian subsidies to NASA and back to Hollywood. Let's look at some of the companies involved in the satellite sector. You want to look for Khazarian Rothschild companies that are majority shareholders? Look no further than Vanguard Group, State Street Corporation, Fidelity, and BlackRock. Go to investors.morningstar.com. That's investors.morningstar.com, and put in the ticker symbol. Look for equity ownership institutions, and you'll see the same entities in control. As you'll see, there are plenty of publicly owned companies and a bevy of privately held contractors whose majority stakeholders could quite possibly be the Zionists. Why do I say that? As it turns out, the Rothschilds are into the venture capital game. For example, the Edmund D. Rothschild Investment Partners. They can capitalize startups and have a major equity stake in them while adding another pawn to their chessboard. Also, Khazarian alliances such as Rothschild Investment Partners and Global Corporate Partners can be forged to gobble up smaller companies as vassals. Here is a telling quote from the press release. Quote, Gerald Rosenfeld, Chief Executive Officer of Rothschild North America, said, "We believe the combination of Rothschild's global relationships and global technology partners' access to and knowledge of the international defense and aerospace industry will create high-level strategic advisory and investment opportunities. These opportunities will arise from the continued consolidation of second and third-tier defense companies, the anticipated relationships that are forming among the aerospace and defense companies on a cross-border basis, and GTP's insight into defense markets and technologies," unquote. FYI, current Secretary of Defense Ashton Carter is one of the original 7 global technology partners, which pretty much sums it all up. Read his corporate bio and realize he's embedded with the Khazarians too. Below are a few examples of satellite-related companies that have Rothschild majority ownership. Sample of satellite majority shareholders: United Technologies, Intelsat, Direct TV, via ATT, Laurel Space and Communications, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, Ball Aerospace and Technology Corporation, Lockheed Martin, General Electric. So that's the reason to milk money from the public. NASA gets about, $13 billion a year for all this fake imagery, along with some real stuff thrown in, like real space rockets going up. You got to throw something real to the people so that they can latch on to and believe everything, and of course keep the money going. But otherwise, making CGI photos are very cheap, and profit margins are huge. So, with that in mind, I hope this gives you a better understanding of our so-called satellites in space.